Okay, let's have a call to order at 4:01. Welcome to the Transitions and Use Tax Citizens Oversight Committee special meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order at 4:01. Madam Clerk, can you please take the roll?
Member Diaz,
Here.
Member Williams, here.
Here. Okay, so do we have any public comments that were submitted to the clerk?
No public comments.
Okay. I guess we're ready for the city attorney to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Chair Scribner and honorable members of this committee.
We can't really hear you.
I said, thank you, Chair Scribner and honorable members of this committee. It seems that we have some new faces here. So the way that I was going to start with this, given that this was a member request, is my understanding, is basically a general overview of Measure U, what it is, what it does, and exactly what the functions of this committee are as contemplated by the resolution that implements Measure U. Measure U was adopted by the voters of the city of Port Hueneme in 2018. It is ordinance number 750, and it is codified in the city's municipal code at 5600 et sec. For purposes of a little bit of background, there are two types of taxes really in California. There are general taxes and there are special taxes. The fundamental differences between these two are that general taxes may be used for any lawful purpose, and those funds recovered from those taxes go directly to a city or local agency's general fund. Special taxes are those taxes that are earmarked for a very specific purpose, and unlike general taxes, those taxes have to be approved by 2/3 of the voters under Proposition 26. So Measure U is a general tax. What this means is that the city council, any monies received from Measure U end up in the general fund, and they can be used by the city council for any lawful purpose. These funds are not earmarked for any particular purpose and may be used in any way the city's council sees fit. Relevant to the Measure U committee, there are two provisions of Measure U, sections 5614 and sections 5615, that apply to this committee. 5614 requires that an independent annual audit be performed of the general fund revenue and the Measure U revenues. And it should include accounting of the revenues received and expenditures made from the transactions and use tax, which will be presented annually to the city council and made available for public review. 5615 authorizes the council to create a citizens oversight committee. Citizens oversight committees such as this one are typically reserved for special taxes. General taxes, when a general tax is adopted, oversight committees are not required given the fact that the monies can be used for any lawful purpose. Notwithstanding, it was deemed prudent to go ahead and create a committee even though one was not required, and to be created and authorized by a resolution. That resolution is resolution number 4257 with the city. It was adopted in April of 2019, and section 10 of the resolution sets forth the scope of duties of the members. Specifically, the members of this committee are to review revenue and expenditure reports prepared by staff as they relate to the receipt of Measure U funds. They are to review the independent audit required by section 5614 and prepare a report of their findings to the council. Measure U committee members are expected to receive and consider reports from the city manager and finance director on operational impact citywide. Committee members are expected to review economic trends. Committee members are also expected to review staff recommendations to council on future use of funds based on revenue and expenditure reports. And as I heard one member speaking of before this meeting, there is a contemplation of an annual report that addresses a number of these things. The first one is a review of the independent audit. And the second one is to provide an annual report to the council on the revenue and expenditure history for the prior biennial budget period, including how expenditures align with priorities set by the city manager under the authority of and in keeping with annually established goals of the council. So when this Measure U committee kicked off, it took approximately, and Lupe can correct me if I'm wrong here, it took approximately 4 months for HDL to get any data on how much funds were recovered through Measure U and how those funds would eventually be spent. Now that we're a lot further along into this process, we have those reports generated, is my understanding, and they are being presented to you tonight for review. And with that, I'll yield to any questions anyone might have.
So what's actually transpired here, this is David Scribner, is that no meetings were really set up. We had the first meeting, I believe you were at, and kind of described, this is when we had another set of personnel here. After that, there had been one other meeting in 4 years until we basically complained a lot. And when Tony Stewart became city manager, he stepped up, and this is our second meeting now. So we're back on track, but we basically have not met or reviewed any of the data from the beginning to now. And we have not written or presented a report because we haven't met and we didn't get the data. So we're kind of in a quandary of how to proceed. It's always been my understanding that the committee was supposed to write a report detailing our findings and present this to the council, which we can do. But I'm a little perplexed about how we proceed to write something when we can't talk to each other because of the Brown Act outside of this meeting. So can you help us?
Yeah, for those of you who might not know, is everybody familiar with the Brown Act up there and what it requires?
A little bit.
I believe, have we had our training? Who has anybody done the Brown Act training?
Yeah, we all had to. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So the way that I would recommend doing it is I would recommend that this committee nominate 1 or 2 members of its body in order to work as an ad hoc commission to basically write this. Otherwise, the discussion regarding what topics should be included and what the outcome of those conclusions should be authored by one of the members of this committee. That would be my recommendation. But to speak to your question about not having the data, I'm informed that one of the reasons for this meeting and the fact that the meetings have now been established quarterly is to ensure that members of this committee are receiving that data.
Yeah, I think we're good moving forward, which I'm pleased with. But we have basically almost 4 years of not much. Some of this was COVID related, I believe, but a lot of it was just decisions by staff to not follow through. So anyway, so your recommendation would be that 1 or 2 people, so that we don't have a quorum making decisions, writes the report, presents that to the group. They can say yes or no and go from there.
That's correct. 1 or 2 people, so we don't have a quorum, and the committee members should select both one or both of those people.
Okay.
I have an additional question. You spoke about the duties of this committee under Resolution 4257.
That's correct, I believe.
Is that where it is? Okay. And can we find that on the website so I can see it in writing?
Yeah, if you go to the city's website under, it says government, and then it goes to departments. If you go to, I believe it's finance, you'll find that there's a Measure U page that I believe has Ordinance 750 as well as the resolution.
Right.
Let me double check that if you're writing it down.
Yep,
that's correct. It is 750.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, do we have any questions? Okay. Let's see if I had any more here. Okay, so because we've had this period without receiving data or meeting, the previous committee, I'm the only one left from that committee. Everybody else dropped out of it. So we have all these years that were not audited or looked at by us. I'm assuming we can now go back and do that for years past, not just the current stuff, right?
We can. I would suggest that the committee members themselves vote on that. Like I said, given the fact that this is a general tax, those funds are legally allowed to be used for any purposes.
And can you speak a little bit about why this committee was formed? I understand it, but it might be helpful coming from you.
The reason this committee was formed is in 2018 when there were quite a few cities that were contemplating a transactions and use tax, and the general prevailing theory was that they had a far greater than average chance of passing if they had a civilian oversight component. So the language is a little bit interesting in the ordinance, in that if you look at Section 5615, it starts, although not otherwise required by law, the city council shall by resolution adopted before the operative date of this chapter establish a citizens oversight committee to review. One of the reasons that was done is because there were intentions at the time that the funds generated by Measure U would be utilized for things like public safety enhancement, as well as infrastructure repair, say potholes and things of that nature. And so the thought is that while it's not required, it would be a good idea and ensure the passing of Measure U to give residents oversight as to how those funds were being spent and whether or not they aligned with the promises made during Measure U.
Any questions about that? It was my understanding that there was a higher threshold for a special tax, and this was basically sold based on all the things you talked about. It's about public safety, potholes, graffiti, gangs, homeless. I mean, there's a lot of positive things in it.
Right.
But because it was going into the general fund, those were not guaranteed. As it turns out, it was very popular. It passed by a margin that would have met the margin for the special tax, but it wasn't set up like that. So the people, strongly supported it. I don't remember what the percentage was. It was 60-70%, I think.
Yeah, it was like 68% or something like that. It surprised everyone that I believe there were, in the immediate area, there were 6 or 7 cities that had introduced a TUT, and I believe Port Hueneme was the only one that passed by a large margin.
And to make it clear to everybody, the transaction tax occurs no matter where you are. So if you were to go onto Amazon, you get it. If you paid cash in Oxnard, no. But if you buy anything with a credit card, you get taxed on it. Be that a car, a pack of gum, whatever. So
Right. Right. People typically confuse TUTs with sales taxes, and that's not really what they are.
And from when we first met and went through this, it's very clear the city has a really poor tax base. That was presented by HDL, I think. They give us a breakdown of all this, and it's desperately needed. We have very little sales tax, and in years past, the state has come in and grabbed a good portion of the real estate taxes. So
I can also add a little bit of background that was occurring around the time for those of you that remember it. There was contemplation of a hotel development on the Surfside parcel adjacent to the Lighthouse and Navy base, I believe. And this was not popularly supported, but it would have generated approximately $2 million in additional general fund revenues that would have basically made Port Hueneme whole instead of running on a structural deficit. The trade-off is that since that could not happen, or council wouldn't push for it to happen, Measure U was the next best choice, and it was anticipated that Measure U would bring in approximately $1.8 million and alleviate that budget shortfall.
Okay, so that's our background. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. So for the ad hoc committee, is there no limit in meeting for those members that are involved?
As long as, under the Brown Act, as long as less than a quorum are appointed to an ad hoc committee, and they do not have continuing subject matter jurisdiction, which basically means they're working on a discrete project and then it ends, then the Brown Act does not apply to that body. And those two members may interact freely without publishing notice or anything of that nature. The only problem is those two members may not speak to any of the other members on this committee outside of a duly noticed public meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
That they can't speak to any other, is that only about what's considered put into the report that's going to be sent?
It would be broader than that under the Brown Act. Theoretically, the Brown Act defines things based on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body. So arguably for this body, it would be anything that has to do with city spending or fiscal policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments, or do you have anything else you would like to say?
I'm good. I'm gonna hang out the rest of the meeting, and I'll hang out in case anybody has some additional questions, given all the new members.
Okay,
Would you introduce yourself one more time? I don't see your name on this.
My name is Kevin Spalding. I'm with the law firm of Green D. Bortnowski, and I am the contracted city attorney for City of Port Hueneme.
Spalding, you said?
Spalding.
Spalding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I guess let's move on to the presentation about the fiscal stuff.
Good afternoon, board members. I will do my presentation from here and see how that works. Projecting, yes, it's projecting. Okay, good afternoon again, Lupe Acero, Finance Director, and I will be presenting this afternoon the updated fiscal year 1920 revenue and expenditure schedule. And this was requested at the last meeting. It is my understanding the fiscal year 1920 revenue and expenditure schedule was presented in the past, but not in the same format that we have presented the last two fiscal years, which have also been included in the audited financial statements. And so what I am going to present today is the expenditures in the format that has been presented, the new format that has been included in the act for the audited financial statements. The Measure U revenues in the ask, let me just go back a little bit. The ask was to present everything from inception of the Measure U, and the inception was like April 2019. So my information is a full fiscal year, which starts really July 1st of 2019 through June 30th, 2020. So we're missing May and June, and I can present it at the next meeting. I have to go back. I think Kevin stated HDL manages the sales taxes for us, and I do believe it took them a little bit of time to get their arms around the coding of the sales tax and getting that over to the city in the correct coding. But I will go back for the months that we're missing, which would be really May and June. The revenue that was generated for the fiscal year.
Excuse me, so that we're clear, we call this 2020, but it's 1920, right?
The fiscal year starts July 1st, right?
And we call that
July-
20.
We call it
okay.
2020, it's
Okay.
1920, correct. And the revenue that was generated was almost $2.6 million, so 2,595. And that is specific to Measure U. When we receive the information from HDL, when they receive the sales taxes, they coded, everything, all the taxes are coded separately with a separate code. That was a revenue for fiscal year 1920. And then the expenditures, as you'll see, also were equivalent to 2.62595,336. And on the handout that I send out, I detailed the expenses. What we include in the accounting, the audited financial statements is a summary of expenses by category and by department. I'm providing you all the details in this presentation. So for public safety, there are salaries included in public safety, which is, you see the community services officer, police communications officer, police officer senior, sergeant, and our homeless liaison. And then we have tasers, so police equipment that was purchased in that fiscal year. We had some upgrades to the police department, and then we have patrols and software. And just to give you a little bit of background, that what I had to do to get this information, because at that time we didn't have, again, it was the first fiscal year of the Measure U. From an accounting standpoint, we didn't have a code to identify those expenses. We do now, and we did for the last report that I provided. So it's a lot easier to pull an activity report that shows all those expenses. I went back and I had to pull invoices to identify what qualified under Measure U. So that's how I compile this information. I think, David,
Thank you for doing that, because it was incomprehensible before. It didn't make any sense.
what was done in the past, in the prior report, was that it was a pro rata. It was a ratio of the salary. So it was still valid expenses, but they were based on the salaries for police, recreation, investigation services. So it was based on a pro rata share, not specific actual expenses. Here we're identifying staff who's working on certain things. Facilities, for example, these are the staffs that are cleaning, doing at the parks or cleaning graffiti. And so we're assigned a percentage of their salary to Measure U. And so that's how we're tracking it going forward.
So you're saying going forward, we'll see it in this format?
Yes, this is the format that we've included in the audited financials, and this is the format that we'll be presenting in.
Now, just this first part, take this public safety. These, for the positions, community service officer, police officer, is there any drill down to, is this just straight salary? Did this add any positions? Did this create raises or include overtime? I mean, is there any way to drill down to see really what that was?
It includes salaries and benefits.
Okay, so just salaries, it wasn't, I mean, Measure U didn't allow them to create any new positions or?
It was to maintain public safety, and so it was, in essence, maintaining the staff that was in place, and or adding new staff, as assuming as people left, and includes the certainly the cost of living adjustments that have taken place every year.
And can we see what, so the total public safety expense was 1.6 million. What's their total budget? Do you know what that is?
I can, back in 2020, I'll have to pull it. Yes, we can do that. I can look at it.
Just percentage wise.
But it's basically taking the positions that were now allocated to Measure U and taking those back to 2020. Because we didn't have that in place. And that's the reason when the 2020 report was presented, was based on a pro rata share of salaries. But I can I can provide that information.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
So, for example, if we take the third line item, police officer senior at $328,000, is that, was that person earning that kind of money before this was instituted?
The numbers, yeah, the salaries are based on that, in that, what staff was earning that fiscal year.
So Measure U then covered part of the police salaries.
Sure, yes,
Okay.
yes. And then streets and maintenance, again, the facilities and grounds maintenance staff is a percentage of the number of staff that are being allocated to Measure U for maintenance, graffiti cleanup. And then the other items, neighborhood speed cushion installation, again, those were based on invoices that we paid in that fiscal year. Supplies for street maintenance, the backhoe loader, the flashing crosswalk sign, street lighting. So this one, the street lighting is a part of the NG project. And we hadn't closed out that project in 2020, but that was actual expenses. So this is based on actual expenses that were paid in that fiscal year. So some of the costs may be higher, but what's reflected here is just what was paid that year. And then the facility, streets and landscape vehicle, 63,604, and community center assessment, 33,000. So again, that has to do with the NG project. We were doing assessments to do. We did the roof, we did the HVAC, but again, this was the initial cost because most of that project was complete. Actually, we just closed it out this year. It was a multi-year project. So the total streets and maintenance is just under 400,000. And then on the next slide, it's parks and recreation. And again, it's the same, taking some of the invoices or some of the equipment that was, or repairs that were done in that fiscal year. I did include the lifeguard program because Measure U is intended also for recreation. So that's why you see a big number there. The 320,000 includes the salaries for the part-time lifeguards. And then, again, some of the smaller items, but I just wanted to show everything that at least I was able to find that pertains to Measure U, because like I said, we didn't have it quoted, so we had to go back and pull the invoices to identify.
So
costs.
now, since then, the 21 and 22 reports, they are coded?
Those are coded. Yes, and 21 and 22 include capital. So we had, from the last meeting, the reports that I presented, we had large capital projects that that are Measure U projects that we did not have in fiscal year 1920. And so the next slide summarizes what I just went over, the revenue at 2.95, and then the summary for each department. Public safety, streets and parks, so for a total of basically the $2.595 million. And again, we didn't have any capital projects in that period.
I think these were coded differently than, or maybe I'm looking at the wrong one. So we have the 2020 report is all coded, and then the years that follow that, 21 and 22, have the same format. So we can
Correct.
compare them.
Correct.
Okay. Can you present, put that all in a packet and send that to each one of us so we can start
Yeah,
the
I
rest
can
of the
send you
report?
the PDFs of what, the handouts from the last meeting included 2 fiscal years.
Okay,
We,
if we
went
have
over
a whole packet, that would be good.
2021 and 2022. And both of them were audited already. So both of those reports have already audited and they're included in the financials. 2023 will be presented in September because we're just closing out the year. So we just literally closed June 30th. So we're still paying invoices. So that will be presented in September, the unaudited numbers in this format. And then our audit should be completed sometime December, January. So in March is when I will present the audited
Okay,
numbers for 2023.
And who exactly is HDL?
It's an outside consulting company that manages, they do a lot of the taxes, sales taxes, hotel taxes for a lot of municipalities.
you can take that if you like. They presented that when they were on our first meeting, so.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions?
So I think we had 2021 and I printed it out, but I forgot to bring it. This one, the 1920 that you have here is really, the line items are detailed by department, broken down.
Mhm.
Whereas this 22 that I have, I don't have 21, it just lists like police administration, patrol, and support. So that's what you'll be showing us then next time.
No, I will have both, the
Okay.
detail and that's the one you have, the printout is the one that goes in the audited financials, because they roll it up. They don't show this level of detail.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So this is unaudited.
No, that should be audited.
This is audited?
Mhm.
Okay.
That's why it's rolled up and it's summarized, they summarize.
Okay, so this is audited, but then, okay, but
This
then
is
we'll see it in this format where it's broken
Mhm.
down. Okay.
On my script. Do we have any other questions about this, or? Nope. Let's see, Steph. So, Mr. Spalding, how do we go about appointing people to write a report? We do that now, it's not, or do we need to wait till it's on the agenda?
It needs to wait until it's on the agenda so that a discussion can take place and an action can be voted on.
Okay, can we put that on the agenda for our next meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, I guess we need to pick another date to meet. Is that our
We
next?
already have one,
We
don't
have, our next meeting is September 28th. Is what we had on the calendar that was approved at 4. We decided 4 o'clock, I think was a good time.
So I guess we're down to, does the committee have any further comments? Okay.
I think if we could make sure that everybody's here for the next meeting, just so that we can pick the 2 individuals. No one's missing. I'm hoping, that they want to be present, for, when that comes around, picking 2 people.
I don't know why Galen isn't here today, so he came in the wrong day last week, so. I don't know, maybe his schedule's off. He normally shows up to everything, so. Okay. So basically, we have our calendar set for next, do we need to vote on that, or are we okay with that?
No, we're good.
Okay,
We need to approve the meeting minutes.
oh, right.
We have the meeting minutes.
We had them at some point.
Wasn't sent out, I don't think.
Do we have a?
I can pull them up.
Yeah, I have a copy of them here. Does everybody have their copy, or do we like to pass it and look at it, or can you pull it up? It was on March 30th.
Okay, I think I just pulled them up.
Yes, that's it.
Mhm.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I motion we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Okay, take a
All in
roll.
favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. 42, 1 absent.
Okay, if there's not any other business, I would move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What time is? The adjourn,
Yes.
adjourn time is
4:38.
4:38.
It was quicker than I thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome. Everyone have a nice evening.
You too.
You too, Kevin.
So we should all think about whether you want to help to write the report, and we'll then have to pass that on to the city.